Why are you called DJ Acidophilus?
DJ Acidophilus came out of when I had some freelancing work and I needed a name for my freelancing company, and I was having some yogurt for breakfast, and it said Acidophilus Live and Active Cultures, and I thought, I love a bad pun, and so Active Cultures became my Twitter feed and Acidophilus became my DJ name.
Okay, and who here thinks that's a bad pun? Let's hear it. All right. Well, anyway, you were great, and it was part of a great night, and it was part of this great kind of mix. But at the end of the last technology question session, Sarah asked a question about, what are you worried about? What are the things that could happen as a result of technological change that may be unintended consequences and problems that we might see? And they cover a range, right? Some of the ones we've talked about are connectivity links people, but it also produces backlash. It elevates culture so people can see them, but it can also dilute them. Connecting people, making it interactive, puts a lot of data out there that people can know about people. Capturing everything on video makes it possible for people to steal content more easily, share content more easily, and so forth. And so the purpose here of this discussion is to throw up some red flags, now there may be some positive unintended consequences. We can talk about those first. But let's start with the negative ones. Christy, what do you worry about?
Well, worry to me isn't exactly a productive energy, so.
Well, what is help us?
So, I guess in relation to kind of framing it, I think that the tendency tends to be that when something new arrives and it has a great deal of momentum, that sometimes the focus of the human beings around it seek to have it be like in a superior position. So when I think about all of the proliferation around technologies, it's not about a replacement strategy for other things. It's about unique ways of harnessing the tapestry of multiple forms of knowledge.
Well, that's pretty positive. Samantha, what worries you? You guys do, tell a little bit what you do, because I don't know if everybody knows, but you use technology with museums, right?
Museums, that's right. So I work with museums to create digital learning experiences in the galleries and to engage global audiences that might never make it through the museum doors. So I'm very optimistic on the power of technology to embolden and empower museums in an educational context. But one thing that in this, it's a relatively new thing in the museum interpretation world, and we've seen that sometimes the technology can get in the way of the real star of the show, which is the artwork or the objects. So in our practice, we have a strong design philosophy about the technology being kind of minimalist and really facilitating the learning and not taking over the museum experience.
But you talk about the museum experience. Let's just tease that one out a little bit. I was at one of these TED Talks, and somebody got up and said, we can save all the art in the world, and we can put it on a computer, and we can represent it in such incredible detail that you would actually be able to see texture, and in further discussion I heard you could actually feel the texture of the art in a way you couldn't at a museum. Yeah. Joe Lowry's song about snapping pictures of the Mona Lisa's behind glass. Yeah. There's 400 people in front of her. It's not a great experience. Do you worry that having the technology may eliminate the museum experience?
Not at all. I don't see these things as sort of adversarial. I think of them as cumulative and additive. I think about a book and reading a book and that experience, and then there's an adaptation of it into a movie. These things are two distinct experiences that offer something very unique, and I think nothing will replace being in a gallery, looking at artwork, being close to a real object. I think the technology just offers an opportunity for deeper learning. Perhaps you're looking at an artwork and the museum only has a certain amount of artworks on display at any given time, but they have a vast collection. Digital technology gives an opportunity to say, hey, here's other artworks in our collection that are related to this. So it's about deepening the experience and deepening engagement, not replacing the physical experience.
So, Bill, you're here, you're running this NYU Abu Dhabi Arts Center. There's a lot of technology going on here, and you deal with artists who are exposed to it. What are the concerns that you've got about unintended consequences?
Well, again, I think I am more optimistic than pessimistic about that.
We need another panel. Could we just get some people here a little bit more pessimistic?
But the panel wasn't the unintended negative consequences,
that's
right?
true. That's true.
And I think that what I see is that emphasis on connectivity. I think it's still a very early phase, and it's an explorative phase where it's the black and white TV portion where people are taking stage shows and sticking them on a screen and figuring out what the expressive power is. And I think what's very exciting right now is when people are looking at virtual reality and gaming and interactive video and using it not just as a novelty, but as something to enhance the expressive power of their work. And that's what I see. But I also think right now there is a point where it's just the fact that, oh, we're using this technology, come see the work, and then you see the work. And I've seen a lot of augmented reality pieces, for example, where the work itself doesn't yet live up to
Is that
the
happening
future
here
promise.
in Abu Dhabi?
It's starting to happen, although these are pieces that I've seen all over the world.
But I mean, I'm just trying to get the sense of, is there innovation going on around these kind of issues right here?
There's a lot. Of course, at NYU Abu Dhabi, we've got an interactive media department that we're working very closely with. We also work closely with our engineering design studio. And when we bring artists to campus, we're also bringing them to speak to the engineering students and really looking at those points of intersection. But it's also happening. Abu Dhabi Art, for example, has been bringing interactive media pieces as part of the art fair each year. So it's happening all throughout the city and throughout the country.
Okay. So now, you know, you're in LA and all this stuff is supposed to be happening out there in LA, and I think that it is. In fact, my own 2 cents is that LA has kind of become the creative capital of the US again. You know, it's sort of, there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. When you talk about the positive unintended consequences of technology, what are you seeing? What are the surprises that artists are encountering as they start exploring these technologies?
Well, I mean, art as a practitioner and as a receiver, art is a way of knowing, right? So when you take that way of knowing and you're exploring it through the different kind of technological applications, to me what happens is the result starts to ground something into perspective. And that's where I gain my most optimism. An artist gives profound perspective to the tools of a time and the ability to take the songlines of the day and put them into a theatric, whatever the context is, but the metaphor of a songline of the time, and put it into the technology. It overrides for me the other part of my experience. And what it does is it overrides it from how technology pressurizes us towards ongoing efficiencies. And efficiencies in speed, and efficiencies in doing things also create lots of pressure. We have to learn more and more and more unique ways to be efficient, when actually the long linger and the long unknowable outcome is the genesis that an artist is going to take something on. So when they leave the crumb trail of perspective within technology, I then feel a way of belonging.
And can you give a specific example of a sort of an artist's encounter with technology that has led to an unexpected place?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about 2 in very different ways. One of them is Ryoji Ikeda, who's an astonishing composer, maker, electronic musician, and like video installation artist. He uses binary code in every single thing that he does. And essentially what he does is he takes the data, massive volumes of data, and he repurposes the poetic inside of the infinite space between 0 and 1. And he makes these extraordinarily grand projections that make you feel, in one way or another, a poetic connection back to entire universes. And he uses these mediums. This is his form. This is his craft. But he does it to repurpose meaning. It's the presence of meaning that sits in it. And so that's one. Another is, you know, Laurie Anderson. Laurie Anderson's one of our great kind of mavericks in utilizing lots of different kinds of technologies, from exploring nanotechnology to the way she manipulates her instruments, and so on and so forth. But I think with both of them and with...
She also recently did a concert entirely for dogs, which I thought was...
Yes, it was spectacular.
It was spectacular.
But
and
most of what she
the dogs loved that.
Yeah, but I think you're trying to take the piss out of Laurie Anderson right
No.
now.
No. In fact, I was
Just careful.
No. I worship the ground she walks on. Don't get me wrong. And I'm glad she's come up. I thought, you know, with Lou Reed earlier, you know,
Sure. But again, I mean, artists use multiple kinds of tools and multiple crafts. It's not just a single, monochromatic gesture towards technology, but really how does a tool enhance and expand the capacity of perspective, wisdom in the pursuit of form to give back to us in a way that keeps us awake to the life that we're living.
Samantha, in the museum space, a lot of the discussion we've had so far, as we talk about technology and stuff, has been the creation of art, visual arts, performing arts. But in the museum space itself, technology is beginning to have a consequence. But I wonder if we think 3 moves ahead. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a Louvre being built over here. It's a remarkable facility. I don't know if you went over and drove by it, and we're going to have a bit of presentation about it tomorrow. But it's one of those buildings that people will fly 7,000 miles just to see the building.
Exactly.
And the experience of being in the building is very, very different from any other museum you've ever been in. Water comes in on the sides. It looks like a kind of traditional village around here of little separate galleries. You walk between it. The roof thing is transparent. It also, there are holes in it. Rain can come through and so forth. That seems to me like a type of museum that can withstand any kind of technological innovation because you're going to want to be in the experience.
Yeah.
But do you see the future of museums changing dramatically in places that can't do that as a result of technology?
Well, yeah, I wanted to build on something you said about creating meaning and context. Yeah. So rather than from the artist perspective, from the curator or museum educator perspective, most of the people that go to museums, because they're public institutions, are more novice museum goers. They're tourists, people who maybe go to 1 or 2 museum visits a year, every 2 years, unlike this crowd that might be a little bit more expert. So
a lot more expert.
A lot more expert.
They're very sophisticated. About 80% of them are sophisticated.
Just not me. So for that average visitor that's coming in, reading a couple of words on a wall plaque next to an artwork or historical object, they need more of that context building and that meaning giving from experts like curators and museum educators or from the voice of the artist. So I think that any museum, whether it's a historic home or a history museum, a natural history museum or an art museum, there's a real need for that. In terms of 3 steps ahead, something I'm really excited about that was touched on yesterday was this idea of 3D scanning. So a lot of monuments or objects that are very fragile, what we've done in the last 10 years is do 2-dimensional digitization of collections. And I think 5-10 years from now, you're going to see that same volume around 3D scanning for sculptures and objects.
Okay, one of the things that strikes me about technological change and the unintended consequences, some of them are already happening, we're just sort of taking them for granted. Some having to do with connectivity. I remember going to NYU Abu Dhabi and you were doing a poetry slam. And a guy came up and he said, "Let's hear it for K-Town." And it was like, what's K-Town? It sounded like it could have been from any city in the States, and it was Khartoum. He was from Khartoum, and he was essentially doing poetry slam in what is becoming a global style. And it seems to me that we call it globalization, but the pace by which some of these new technologies are connecting to places that have never had it before is going to produce a kind of incredible shock, and which could be very positive. It could be a variety of different things. Are you seeing that happening too? Because you've got a very global group coming into NYU.
Yeah, I'm seeing it happen, and we do take it for granted because we've got incredibly powerful computers in our pockets and our pocketbooks, right? And so we've got computers that are also databases that have changed the way we think. They've made us more self-reflective, and we're able to now share it in real time. We had a group of a Zanzibari Tarab ensemble performing at a conference at NYU a couple of weeks ago, and they played to a small crowd, mostly of the conference goers. I live streamed it and tagged the musicians, and within the matter of about a day, about 2,000 people, mostly in Zanzibar, had watched the show. And we were able to reach an exponentially larger audience through that live stream than we ever could have in the actual space, and then started to get people to recognize the level of artistry, but also the fact that this conference about cultural heritage was happening in Abu Dhabi at that time.
Well, and it's a force multiplier. I mean, we're live streaming things, and we put them out on the web, and you put them out on YouTube, and they live forever. And one-off ephemeral things all of a sudden become sources of enduring content. And that's kind of, by the way, that's an unintended consequence too. I've talked to Carla, who's a singer, and she'll say if she goes to a birthday party and sings happy birthday and somebody videos it and posts it on the web, and then somebody's looking at her for a part, and the first thing that pops up is singing at a birthday party, that's also not, that's not the way that, one wants to sort of introduce oneself to the professional world. And so it works in many ways. Does the speed of change produce some of these unintended consequences in your mind, Kristen?
Sure. But I mean, going to what you were just talking about in relation to Carla, and what I was saying earlier around the pressure of efficiency, right? So we can look at, yes, you can reach a vastly larger audience through that methodology. But one of the things we're studying at the Center for the Art of Performance with neuroscientists and choreographers and dancers specifically is also what's happening to our cells when you're in a live experience. The live experience is going to do something very different to your mirror cells, to your cognitive empathy, to all of this other sense of it that you can't replicate in a mediated experience. So the objective is not to have that efficiency, because you can reach more, replace the intimacy of the live exchange of human beings.
That's interesting. I want to open it up to questions now, because there were so many questions before, and I think we've got 8 or 9 minutes here. So let me go. First of all, I skipped over you the last time. Did you want to ask them a question? No, you're not interested in them? Okay.
Thank you.
Because we could move on to another panel very quickly here. I just want you to stay interested. Okay.
Hi, my name is Ravinder, and since this morning, I have been that one name, Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, has been coming to my mind again and again, because what we are talking here, I think he said it many years ago. One thing that the technology is doing is accessible. You have to work hard. A person became professor after doing a lot of research, a lot of studies. But now he can sit on the Google and type something and get entire knowledge accessible to him in 5 minutes. What previously people used to work very hard to acquire that knowledge. Number one. Number two, will it destroy, this technology will destroy the beauty of a live performance eventually, maybe after 10 years, not now, but maybe after 10 years. And a Kindle can never replace the experience of holding a book in your hand, the fragrance of that book. Are we killing those joys of our lives?
Well,
I don't know. My Kindle smells great, but go.
I wouldn't frame it in terms of killing joys. But I do, in fact, talking about Los Angeles, there's Google, a variety of other things that are there, and I have often intersected and done work with them. And one of the things that I will say to them is, to who did we used to ask our questions before Google? And it was the process of seeking through others the information that you were looking for from your doctor. You don't Google up, what do I do about my sore throat? You're actually going. So the question is really to remember that when we only posit the questions around knowledge to the efficiency of the response of an incredible, miraculous thing, Google, to whom did we used to ask that? And it was a process of asking many across the journey of seeking things, including a stranger that you're standing next to on a street to find your way, as opposed to maps. And there's something about the release towards the implicit trust of another. And what happens to you in the pursuit of that where you're interacting in a way that puts it into an embodied life, which is different than the efficiency of Google. So I don't think it's that it eradicates joy, but it's the remembrance that you're operating in a different way when you ask the question to Google than when you're asking the person next to you that you've never met, that you risk the possibility of your vulnerability to be directed somewhere else.
Well, I assume that holds true in museums as well,
Yeah.
because when you would go to a museum, you would encounter art you didn't expect.
Yeah.
You would be guided by the curator. You would have a set of experiences. Just like if you go to the record store, instead of buying on Amazon, you browse. You've made the trouble. You know, geography has sort of put you there. It's hard to get out of there. You browse and you discover new things. And do you think we're losing the process of discovery?
Well, I think that my philosophy around why I founded a company and work specifically with museums is to strengthen this institution. So in addition to individuals and talking to your neighbor and talking to your doctor, also looking towards one of the most credible and authoritative institutions is museums. They're not perfect, but the public views them as a very credible and authoritative resource. But again, you know, I wouldn't, if we walked away from the sort of discussion of technology and the arts, I would hope that we challenge ourselves not to think of these things in conflict with each other. Sure, there are negative consequences and things that have to be looked at again and regulated, but if we approach it in more collaboratively instead of adversarially, I think we could see real opportunity.
Well, you know, I have to say, though, I go back to Liz Lehrman's, you know, this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, you know, we have to be able to see both, right?
Yep.
And understand both.
I'm from Morocco, and I'd like to share with you a very amazing example of the impact of the TV on the social issues. In Morocco, during these 15, 20 years, we had a really silent revolution, demographic one, as the average rate of children by women decreased from 5.7 to 2. It's a huge revolution, demographic one. It means a lot for women because now they are more free, they have less children, and very serious studies show us that maybe the impact was thanks to the TV and was thanks to this Mexican series, because it was mainly women were illiteracy and they have TV and they show TV, and it was like experiencing that they can have another life, not only having one children a year. And for me, this study is very interesting because it means for me that we have to be very humble and to decolonize our mind and to not judge art and it's good art or bad art, you know, because for intellectual series are bad art, you know, but I think that we have to be modest and just observe what happens. It's a non-intentional impact, you know.
Thank you. You know, I see you're sitting next to Berta, champion of Mexican culture here. And I'm sure she's very pleased to know that telenovelas are responsible for reducing the population of Morocco by 60%.
Since you insist, I say something.
Yeah, I demand that you say something.
Keep chasing me with the red ball. So. I just want to comment on what Ravender had just said, and about accessibility and how accessibility has diluted the experience of gaining knowledge. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like the different form of accessibility has changed the knowledge form itself from, you know, disciplines and being experts at certain disciplines where, because it's accessible in a network that is hard to reach, you tend to have a knowledge in a subject that is huddled, let's say, in the way you can reach it. Whereas now, because of this accessibility, there are new knowledge forms emerging that are more multidisciplinary. And maybe knowledge now is taking this form of finding new forms of knowledge rather than subject matter expertise or depth, but more transversality rather than depth. And I always think there will still be people like you and me, Ravender, that prefer to go, into things deeply. But then also I think we're missing out a lot if we don't see how they, as Secretary General put it, how the dots connect as well. I don't think we can survive, with progress.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to that is the importance of the human relationship and the human curation and the speed at which that can operate. When I first started curating internationally, I remember I was presenting a group from the northeast of Brazil at a festival in Central Park. And I had to, somebody that I trusted told me that there was a group in Brazil that was really important. They introduced us. I called by phone. They sent me a videotape. I had to convert it from PAL to HTC. It took probably about 4 weeks before I can even look at the video. We've reached a point now where, because I'm connected to that person in real time through social media, I can develop a network of experts in their own local scene, in their own local context. And we can be chatting in real time and they say, look at this video, this artist is really important, look at this. And you can frame it. And I think we're not just looking at Google, but we're actually expanding our networks to local experts in their own context. So it's not all mediated by a major media, but it's actually mediated by participants within a specific scene. And I think that flattening and that horizontal nature is really essential.
We've got about 2 minutes, so let's...
And what Bill's saying, I also think that in that, it allows the presenter/curator to build context in a local environment that set the conditions that help elevate and activate, activate differently when the work is dislocated from its own cultural context into another, that we have been able to till the soil properly for the artist to not have to do absolutely everything. So the curator's role is also the protection of context, right, in selection, not the upholding of popularity, but the protection of context, so that that meaning can go into an audience of who become, in a way, an extension of the living archive of your work. I mean, that's what we're doing. We are co-making memory, and we are co-making meaning. And it's the curatorial, artistic, and management, and a variety of other things around it that are also, and the use of technologies, escalating the tools that we have to till the soil appropriately for the perspective to find its strongest footing, so the artist can move quickly to transformation to access their work, and not education constantly before the song can have flight.
Okay. We've got literally just a minute, so something fairly brief.
Dana Firas from Jordan, and my question actually relates directly to what you just said, but do we actually know that all this technology is affecting people seeking the experience negatively? I mean, are there empirical studies that say all of this development in technology is having a negative impact on seeking the experience, or is this an assumption?
I would say one of the things that we see in the US is that we've had a chapter in which the attendance to live performance has actually started to drop in different kinds of forms. We can blame technology. We can also blame the way we deal with our economics of access. You know what I mean? So I think that we can misconstrue what the locus of that is. So I don't think it replaces. There's also things that happen where, younger artists who are very, very facile with this material and they're making work in very short cycles, for the purpose of distribution through social media. That is its stage. And so that can also build a different level of appetite, awareness, interconnectivity, belonging, amplification, affirmation, soulful purpose. So I don't think it's not a disaster, but the cycle that we tend to be with live performance anyway, if we blame technology, social media, and distribution as a replacement system for the live performance, we are ameliorating ourselves from looking at how we have screwed with the economics.
Okay.
We overprice or underprice or do these kinds of things to create data, you know, and that creates a skewing more than the audience.
I don't want to sell short the next panel. This is very interesting, and they're going to follow in it very, very briefly.
Just one brief, my name is Kevin from France. Just one comment regarding the impact that culture sometimes plays in a negative way for the ecology. I just give one, and how technology can solve that. Just one point, that in any given day in the world, there are about 6 to 8 Western classical orchestras that are traveling in by plane, half of an Airbus 330, putting an enormous carbon footprint on the Earth. Technology has now given the possibility that orchestras can do live streaming, what I would call electronic resonancies, bridging gaps through technology and bringing concerts to other parts of the world without doing damage to our ecology.
Okay, that's very interesting. We haven't beheaded you twice. It was very close, but you're okay. All right. This is a great panel. These are great discussions. I see in you a lot of interest in these technological discussions. We've got another one coming up. I hope you guys will stick around, and we'll keep the conversation going. Please join me in thanking this panel.